Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. Hopefully you are doing well. We are here with the best video of the week. It is our trade talk here ahead of round 18 of the AFL season. Hopefully you are doing very well. We know that this video is where we get the best engagement. Everyone talks about their trade targets, who they're wanting to get rid of, who they're wanting to bring in. And I am going to pose you some interesting questions today through the video. So let's get straight into it. The number one traded in player, Georgie Stevens. Late in the day before the game, ends up playing 73% time on ground, has 21 touches, 3 marks, 3 tackles, kicks a goal, and scores 84. Now, if this was any other team other than Geelong, I'd be very keen on this move. Just the fact that it's Geelong, Bailey Smith was also out, Taliesin Stengel was out for personal reasons. Does he stay in the team? If he stays in the team, how long? At 280, he's already gone up 50k. I think there's better downgrade options. That it's like if you almost want better cash gen, there's better options. And then if you want to save money, there's also better options. So George Stevens is being brought in by 6,000 coaches. This could be one that does go really well for owners, but I'm a bit hesitant with Stevens because God knows how long he's going to stay in that side for. So just be mindful, buy and beware. Zach Merritt, after his beautiful 145 that I was staring at and didn't go there, still priced at 938 for Zach Merritt, who is a 100 averaging midfielder. He's at 102 because of that 145. Goes into Richmond this week, but then the run gets pretty tough for Essendon. He goes GWS, Bulldogs, Sydney, Geelong, St Kilda, Carlton. There's going to be quite a few tags in there. 5.4 thousand are getting on Merritt. I would tick Merritt off because at 940k, he has potential to be a top 6, midfielder, more than just a top 8 midfielder. So if Essendon have figured out their problems, obviously Jai Caldwell is out probably for the rest of the season. Darcy Parish is out. So Zach Merritt could actually be a really good get. Just know that there's tags coming for a Zachy Merritt. Errol Goulden played 74% of time against Port Adelaide, and everyone thought he was going to go down significantly. He's only up around the 90% time on ground mark, where last year we saw him up around the 95% time on ground mark. St Kilda, the expectation is a Windhager's going to try and tag him, but I think Errol's just too good of an athlete to get off the chain the same way we saw it with a Nick Dacos get off the chain against a Windhager. And then he goes into North, GWS, Essendon, Brisbane, Geelong, and West Coast. And Sydney at this point are still really playing for their season. The marks and tackles is what's incredible. 6, 7, 7, 8. He's just such a great footballer. His ceiling is so high because he does so much off the ball. He's not someone who needs 40 touches in order to get a really good fantasy score. Because he does so much marking and tackling around the ground, he can have lower possession games. And you can see my little indicator is next to Errol's name because I am going Errol this week. I will talk through my trade targets later. Colby, priced at 84. I think it's now or never for Colby, especially with this Melbourne matchup here. Melbourne are decent for halfbacks. I think there was some talk about him going forward at the end of the game last week, but I think that was just them moving magnets, trying to find a combination that was going to work. If you're Clarko, you got to keep him at halfback. I know they're not winning games of football, but his development as a halfback, to me, is more important than results right now. And I am a firm believer that he will stay at halfback. Caleb Daniel being there does help him because Daniel typically takes the kick in and then kicks it to Colby, which gives him a mark. So we saw, I've been talking the last few weeks about a bump in his marks, and the minute he's gone up to 9 marks, he's going to put a 120 on the board. So Colby is a very solid option, as is Jack Macrae. I am very pro this Jack Macrae move. If you are moving on, say, a Caleb Daniel or a Christian Petrarca, I could definitely get on board moving to a Macrae. Since his injury, we've seen him play pretty bulk midfield time. Had 5 marks, 10 tackles on the weekend. Had 4 tackles the week before, 6 tackles the week before that, 5. So he's involved. The marks were a little bit low, but this is why we saw an increase in his scoring this week because he's gone and put on another couple marks and kicked a goal. So I think Macrae as a F5, F6 is a fantastic option at his price, as is Zach Butters. Someone who currently sits in my side, played 90% time on ground against Brisbane, but that may have been due to some injuries. Obviously, we had, Vicentini go down, which meant Wines went into the ruck, which meant that there's obviously an extra midfield spot there. But 6 tackles, 5 marks, 120 points with West Coast at home this week. Thank you very much. Job, Now, the difference with Job was he got thrown into defence, and he is meant to be a bit of a swingman. He did kick 2 goals against the Giants and then went back and probably took a few extra marks as well. This is a pick where I don't mind it as much as a forward at 310. There are a lot of forwards starting to emerge, in that price range. So if you could get a Job Shanahan and say you didn't have an Archer May or a Taru, I'd be looking at Shanahan as the next option. Bont, similar to Zach Merritt, 944k. You're getting a top 8 midfielder at, priced at 94, 93. I think these are guys who are, between Merritt, Butters, and Bont, I think you need 2 out of the 3 in your side this week. And I mean, Merritt with that Richmond matchup is very juicy, but I'm going Butters more for the long term, and I already own a Bont. But these are the kind of deals you want to be making. If you want to be getting off of your Cheras, your Longs, those guys that have probably fattened out and you've got nothing else to do, then I'd be 100% moving for Bont, Butters, and Merritt as soon as possible. Whitfield, now I owned him for that 23 against Gold Coast, which is really annoying. He obviously didn't play against the Eagles over in Perth. He's got Geelong this week, and then he goes into Essendon. He probably runs into a tag here against Sydney, but then goes Doggies, North, Gold Coast, and St Kilda. So I think we're going to want him from round 21, which is what my plan is. Let him come down in price a little bit, and then try and attack him for that last month of the season. But he is a good move. Similar to George Stevens, Roan Steele, again, played very well Friday night as a debut game with a 69. But with a still side bottom out of the side, does it mean he comes straight out for him this week? So, again, buy and beware. 267, -5 break even. If he plays, he's going to have a great role. But you've also got Ned Long. You've got Tom Mitchell playing in that midfield now as well. So I'd be a little bit on edge about a Roan Steele. Same with an Ashton Moira. He's probably got more opportunity to stay in the side with Carlton blowing it up. But again, he's not fantastic. Priced at 230 still, though, because he had a sub game early, so you'll probably wait one more week on a Moira, which is this Brisbane game, and then get him in for Melbourne if you need that downgrade. Nazaya, I think he's really starting to elevate himself as the D1, averaging 111. I feel like I speak about him every single week. He has just been a fantastic get for me and my side. And again, if you're in a luxury position and you want to move on, say a Zorko, I have absolutely no issue with it. Again, there's talks of a tag this week against Sydney. You'd expect Geelong to put some work into him, but then this run to finish the year, Melbourne, North, Richmond, Essendon, and the Giants, you need him for that run. Jack Martin, I've had a few people ask me about Jack Martin, priced at 600k at half back. I really like the role. Obviously, the time on ground's not fantastic, but 9 marks playing in that defence. Again, if Geelong are controlling games, that, Henry and Stewart and Martin are all going to get amongst it. Guthrie, they're all going to get amongst the chipping around game. I really like this move if he's like your 7th forward. So if you can up, in a couple weeks, or, if you could go a Taru down and then a May up to a Martin, and then you play the loop game between a Martin and a Daniel, say, and you get a red dot in there, then I actually really like the move. Again, similar to a Zorko, is him being in this halfback role actually going to support his body moving forward? I'm keen to watch one more game. Like, he did pop a 107 against Richmond. If he can go all right against the Giants, his break-even's 9, so he's probably going to be around that 630 mark next week. But I think he's a get. People are talking about Dan Curtin at a similar price range. I'd much rather Jack Martin over a Dan Curtin. So I am very for Jack Martin. Will Dawson as a downgrade option in defence, I think is fantastic. I think they just need to play him. Hornet, I think we're starting to see the turn of Hornet. I feel like if you want to get on him, now's the time. 721 against West Coast. Again, Hawthorn, Adelaide are games that, I feel like he would actually play well in. Adelaide, he went 89. Hawthorn went 100. Port's run isn't great, but again, they're playing for pride, and he's also playing for a spot in the side. So I think Hornet at this price, similar to, if you can get from Jack Martin, you're paying 100k, 120k to get Hornet. I think you go there as well. And there's not really anyone else standing out down the bottom there. So let's look at who people are selling. The most traded in person from last week, Jai Caldwell, is out. It's confirmed that he has got a syndesmosis injury, and that pretty much wraps up his season. So he came in for 1 week for me, and out goes Jai Caldwell. Ned Long, who I moved out to get Caldwell, is also the second highest traded. I think you can get rid of him. Zach Johnson, I fully understand why people are selling Zach Johnson. Break even of 22, so he can definitely go. He's still in my side at this rate. Caleb Sarong, after dropping a stinker that everyone knew was coming, he's had 2 really bad tag games in a row. But then between Hawthorn, Collingwood, West Coast, I don't see any tags coming in the next 3 weeks, and I feel like you've probably got other priorities to do in order to get out of your side. So I'd probably hold a Caleb Sarong. Manny Liddy, I don't know why people are trading Manny Liddy out, because Peps has just gone down with an ACL. So I'd expect a Manny Liddy to come into the side anyway to play that mid-half forward role. So I'd be holding a Manny Liddy. Now, Doherty, I can understand why people are selling Doc. He's just got dual position, which you can flick him into your defense. For me, if Doc's not named out, I'd be holding Doc. I think the role's fine. He's still putting up 80s. I know he's priced at 91 now, but he's pretty much averaging 90 odds since the buy. So I'd hold a Doc if you need to. Matty Roberts has to go after being the sub. Don't need to talk about that. Sheldrick, Madden, Clark, I can understand why people are selling. Again, he's made his cash. Move him on. Bailey Dale, I can see why people are selling Bailey Dale. He's had a couple quiet ones recently. If we go fixtures, he goes Adelaide, Brisbane, Essendon. Again, I feel like you're going to have other priorities than getting rid of a Bailey Dale. So I would hold. Then the rest look to be more, same with the Chera. Chera goes Brisbane, which isn't a great matchup. But again, Brisbane don't tag. And I feel like if anyone's going to tag, Chera might actually go do a run with job. So the tackles might be there. And then Melbourne, Hawthorn, Fremantle, Gold Coast, Port, Essendon actually isn't the worst run for Carlton anyway. So they're probably the most talked about players that are on the way out. It is still early on Tuesday, so there is plenty of time for this to change. But my current trade plans are Jai Caldwell out to Errol Goulden, Will Ashcroft out to a Zach Butters. Now, I could go and chase the ceiling score of a Merritt. So Zach Butters at this point is owned by 12.5% of people. Zach Merritt is owned by 16%. So I feel like between these two, 938k to 947k, there's not a whole lot splitting Merritt and Butters. Let me know in the comments which way you would sway on that. But this is how my side looks at the moment. We've got pretty much a back 6 that I'm relatively happy with. Like Callum Mills can go at some point. I think what I like with Mills over an Ashcroft is, one, I like the those, fallen premiums in the midfield verse who I can get Mills to right now in defence. And with St Kilda and North Melbourne over the next 2 weeks, I'm very happy to keep Mills. Colby is still making bank as we spoke, so he's not going anywhere anytime soon. And the rest of my defence is fine. Sinclair is frustrating, but I think teams are going to start putting work into Naz. Having both of them is not the end of the world because they're going to chip the ball around to each other. In the midfield, obviously Tom McCarthy's not ideal to be on field. I can loop between the two, but I also don't have a way out. Like I can't actually make the loop. So my other option is if I wanted to loop, I could almost loop Mills because a Bustling is not playing. I could actually throw like Hasty there because I don't actually. If Hasty's named, then I'm in trouble. But if I wanted to look at McCarthy now, when do West Coast play? They play the last game of the round, so it would be Colby say against who's North got? They got Melbourne on Sunday. I don't really want to play the loop game on Monday because I'm actually travelling from Melbourne. So it'd be, can I loop potentially with a Sydney? When do they play? They play Sunday as well, which is not ideal. So I'm probably not going to play the loop game this week because it just doesn't suit. But, all my loops are all playing on Sunday, which isn't great. I'll probably get a chance to look at a Johnson, who's playing on Saturday night. If Zach Johnson goes nuts, and when do the Saints play? The Saints play on Sunday. So if Zach Johnson goes crazy, I could flick Hasty if he's dropped into my midfield. And then we can play, maybe McCarthy sits on the bench against Port Adelaide and then Mills and McKercher play. So I've got that as an option. So that's fine. Midfield line, if it's Brayshaw, Dawson, Dacos, Goulden, Chera, Bont, Butters / Merritt, and then McCarthy, will eventually get McCarthy up to a, fallen premium probably at some point, but he's making monster cash. Sherry Gorn, have been disappointing the last few weeks, but they've both had tough matchups. I knew I was going to wear that. And then forward of the ball, we're looking all right as well. Smith, Kennedy, Jackson, Myers, Petrarca, and Caleb Daniel. Again, is the priority Daniel out this week? I don't particularly like the options forward of the ball just yet. I think McRae's the only one I'd go to, but I feel like a Butters versus a West Coast or a Martin or a Merritt could be a better option. My other option is, instead of going to get Errol, I could actually go and get Zach Merritt this week and go Merritt and Butters this week. That's another option I've got just to bank a little bit of cash, because I've still got 137k here. But if I change this to a Zachy Merritt, so let's get rid of Gooden and let's go last week. Zach Merritt, you have traded out. What's going on here? Where's Goulden? Let's get rid of Errol Goulden. Why can't I get rid of Goulden? God, this game is silly sometimes. Let's go back to my team. Let's go edit trade. Give me my cash. And then if we go and put in a Zach Merritt, that gives me 272k for next week. Again, I feel like if I can get to Goulden, I feel like I need to go and get Goulden. I think, what's he owned by as well? His ownership's probably flying up this week as well. He's up to 6.4% owned. I just think he is such a good get this week. I think Merritt will outscore him this week though, and that's what makes me want to go, do I go a Merritt this week, and then next week you turn Chera into Goulden, and then you turn Daniel up somewhere else? Because I feel like that difference in price is only 100 odd K. Could I then next week go Chera to Goulden, and then could I go Daniel to McRae next week? That's the thought process. And then you have Goulden, Merritt, Butters. That midfield then looks absolutely stacked, because for Goulden from next week, I think is when you really want him. Like St Kilda, he could go nuts against, but I see a world where he could also get locked down. So let me know in the comments, would you go Goulden this week? Would you go Merritt this week to get that Richmond matchup on Saturday night? And then Goulden next week, because his break even is still 106. So Goulden's price isn't going to move where Merritt's is. So for now, I think I'm almost talking myself into getting a Zachy Merritt in this week, because I think I want him long term anyway. We then have 270k where we can then move a Caleb Daniel. So what's the price between a Daniel and a McRae? McRae's 130k difference, which isn't ideal because Daniel's down at 809k. So we'd have to look at what Chera, with a, 1 point, I have to do the maths, but I think we might not be able to potentially get it over the line. I've got to do some calculations here. I'm going to expect that Goulden's going to sit around the 1.7 mil, and then McRae in at his price, and then we'll factor in the money I've got in the bank. But that is potentially what my side looks like this week, which if you told me I was going to have Zach Merritt and Zach Butters as your M7 and M6, you would have thought you'd be in a pretty good position. So that's where my side is at YouTube. Let me know in the comments what your trade dilemmas are, and I will get to the comments as soon as I can. But if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you smash a thumbs up and a subscribe on the channel, and I'll see you guys very, very soon for another video.